Well, I know it's only been a couple days since I did the last one, but that's just how it worked out this week. Where do we want to go from what it is that I brought up on Wednesday this week? My inclination is to it's to maintain, if you will, that shot across the bow that the trisextile configurations of Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus are essentially have had in motion for a while, but they're all right there. They're 4 degrees of their particular signs right now, and you have to wonder. I think wondering into this situation might be the most appropriate way to deal with the strength of the planetary signature is about right now. Jupiter opposed to Pluto, sextile to Uranus, trine to Neptune, and that early degree of Leo. Now, earlier this week, I read off the Sabian symbols for everything except for Jupiter, that 4th degree of Leo. It reads, rock formations tower over a deep canyon, and the keynote, the structuring power of elemental forces during the long cycle of planetary evolution. I think that long cycle is a good and an appropriate factor to hold in mind as we consider those 3 transformational planets seeking the potential of spinning, if you will, a new version of the story of mankind that symbolically presents, kind of like the stones on this beach behind me, a version of multi-racial, multicultural, multi-energetic varieties of the potential of life, all kind of jumbled together. And you might say, oh, look at that red stone over there. See how it's got very defined lines? And the white one right below it. And then there's that one that has that beautiful purple in it. They're all in the same beach. This outer planet signature stands or can stand as an invitation for all of us on this planet to really recognize the vitality of participating together in this experience that we signed up for, right here, right now on planet Earth, in such a fashion that we're all important. All of life is important. I think of a word. I could go a number of different directions here. When I was in college, majoring in economics, of all things, I was not comfortable when the professors were putting forth the idea of unlimited resources. And having lived in multiple different cultures around the globe, I was aware that that was not a reality that was sustainable. I still agree with that today. And the reason I bring it up at this particular time and in this configuration that the outer planets are spinning for us right now is that at the global level of interaction, this is worthy of focus for humanity to recognize the part, the position that we have been invited to play with one another in a formulation of global consciousness. There's that transpersonal kind of experience that steps just a little beyond that personal space where, I am an individual. As such, everything that I am aware of is more important to me than anything else. But is it? Does the greatness of the presentation that I put forth of the me carry such significance as to make the presentations of any and all others insignificant? I don't think so. I think the intertwined connectivity that arrives when any of us gather one with another and discover aspects of that particular gathering energy that couldn't take place any other way but by our being together in that moment, being an invitation that those particular energies that we represent are radiating out in all directions, saying, come, participate with this energy. We know, we recognize the vitality of why it is that we are being brought together on a much larger scale than any of us individually recognizes as, a theoretical ultimate capacity. We need each other. This be true. Well, this week, it's Sunday. I threw the aspect of the moon in there for this morning, just because it was kind of unique. It's in the process of, even though it's a very fast moving aspect, a mystic rectangle has been basically, generated in the sky. That's a lot of trines and sextiles and oppositions, all, throwing out questions, throwing out considerations as to, what is it? And, who are our players in that mystic rectangle? Well, it's Pluto and Neptune and Jupiter and the Moon. But we can't leave out the Uranus factor, that strong, trine here, air trine. Gemini, Libra, and Aquarius. At 4 degrees of Aquarius, 4 degrees of Libra, and 4 degrees of Gemini. The percolating of our thinking processes, the air signs, is putting out an invitation for, taking a step to the beyond transpersonal planets from a lunar perspective. What is it that comes up within me? How do I feel at this time about that potentially larger perspective of energy knocking at the door? Because it's essentially been knocking for a while and going to be knocking for a while longer, asking us, do you see the potential for a larger picture of what it is that we as humanity could be about, that we are not currently engaging with? That needs to rest with us. I know it's resting with me. And even as I say resting, it's an active kind of resting, My thoughts turn and return to this outer planet configuration. Transpersonal space is being tickled in such a fashion that I have to ask myself, what version of the larger picture of being in this earthly realm at this time is knocking at the door and saying, my phone is going crazy. There must be a family communication going on. No doubt it is. Now, my wife was just showing me, just prior to coming on the air here, my granddaughter, watching the soccer game on TV and spinning around in the middle of the room. She's 5 years old, saying, "Go Argentina!" And they'd put a crown on top of their dog's head, and it was overtly entertaining. Even though Argentina didn't win, Spain won. The closeness of the game, 1-0. It should stand as a reminder, not of differences that we represent to one another, but the potential harmony of energies that we have to share with one another, no matter what the circumstances, are an invitation for participation in a much larger container, or an awareness of a much more integral container that we as humanity represent while here on planet Earth, the energies of this particular week. I basically just wrote down 3 things. We have on the 21st, a waxing quarter moon, first quarter, and that's at a late degree of Libra. These charts are all set up for 8 o'clock in the morning on the West Coast. But the moon, it's asking us, in your set intention for this lunar cycle, which transpired essentially a week ago, Sunday of last week, Tuesday of last week. Let's go back. Yeah, I thought so. New moon. And close enough to Mercury to be an invitation to Mercury retrograde, to be an invitation for how we think and communicate with one another, as being part of the vitality of what this next lunar cycle is going to present. And this particular lunar cycle, which began in Cancer, ruled by the moon, set up the opportunity for utilizing our connection to ancestral awareness as the moon and the sun bounce together off that 25 degrees or 23 degrees of Cancer, saying, don't forget, you are never really alone, but you have to sometimes request the presence of that ancestral knowledge and wisdom. Whoops, I see I didn't have my microphone down by my mouth, so I'm hoping that you can hear this first part. Crank your volume up. I don't want to have to go over and start this thing again. We're at the waxing quarter moon consideration. And keeping in mind the larger transpersonal picture that I began earlier this week to bring to our focus. And we're getting near the end of the sun's Cancer cycle. When we get to the middle of next week, Wednesday, see the sun there? 29 degrees, 49 minutes. Just 11 minutes away from stepping across the line into Leo, which it will do on this 22nd day. Always, when planets move from one sign to the next, it's like a changing of hats. I got a hat for Christmas last year. It says, Mercury is in Gatorade. And we're still in the Mercury retrograde cycle. Be it Gatorade or whatever flavor you happen to want it to be. The shift from Cancer to Leo the sun's home port is of such a nature that individually, after all, because the sun is the Leo is it's a personal expression sign. And the sun ruling it, going into it, is going to emphasize in some fashion an urge to want to put something out there that likely you haven't done before, maybe not successfully. And as the sun is the focal point of our particular portion of the galaxy, one should keep in mind these characteristics: performer, ruler, magical child, entertainer, noble prince, princess, a knight, a king, a queen. There's a regality that the sun represents, and when it comes home to Leo, pay attention. Does your arena of influence require at this time some kind of presentation from the self out to mix with the energy of others? That's really what a stage presentation or the offering of a story presents as opportunity to, be the invitation to those listening to, spin the tale the best way that they can, allow it to move into and through their consciousnesses. We may have a version of the story that we're putting out there, but each of us is going to tune into aspects, particular points of the storyline process as we become invited to be in the story of life. This is Leo. The invitation is going out to each of us in this Leonian energy to live a potentially new story. If we take the symbol for the sun, a dot in the very center of a circle, think of the sun. It's hot and it's dry. It stands for your basic self. I am. It's your appearance. It's your stance in life. Who are you? The furnace of your being, that is the sun. The sign defines how you radiate vitality. Where is that sun in your makeup? because that particular sign is radiating that vitality. What motivates your solar core? The particular house that it's in, I talked a little bit about houses last time, reveals the direction or the arena of that creative expression of yourself. The sun represents self-realization. It is a personal experience. It's your center of awareness. Think of the dot of self surrounded in a circle that is spirit. The self, represented by this solar energy, is bringing into consciousness the potential of a well-rounded spiritual energy. Now, you wouldn't want your son to just kind of be thrown into the background of a situation as being, semi-irrelevant or not. That's just not how the sun runs. And in Leo, it's highly likely that you want to be the center of attention. As it's a little family thing. When Jupiter, which just recently went into Leo, arrived, my Sagittarian sun, I'm not talking about my solar sun, I'm talking about my son, the one who, my middle child, had what seemed to be kind of a challenging moment where his Jupiter in general, wanted to say things. And I mean, when he would arrive on the scene, it was, mile a minute talking about this, that, the other thing. That Jupiter in Leo, it's like, it wanted to express, you could feel that fiery energy, wanting to present something. Well, Jupiter's in Leo. The sun's going to catch up to it. Not this week. Next week. But that potential percolating array, this was during Mercury retrograde cycle, he wanted to get some things off his chest. And I had to appreciate it, because I could see the planetary energy at work coming through him. It wasn't necessarily that everything he was saying made the absolute sense in the world, but he needed to get it out. The sun coming into Leo this week, and essentially joining up with that Jupiter as it maintains its positional perspective that is in aspect to Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus. Is a reformation of the transpersonal reality, attempting to put in an appearance and wake us up to a much larger container, within which we dwell. Welcome to Leo. And Leo is the birthing of children. What is it that this particular Leo cycle that's going to, yes, the sun is going to also be in that position with Jupiter, tickling Pluto, Neptune, and Uranus from that 4th degree of Leo. And you have to ask yourself, what is it that wants to be born through me at this time that is of a much larger significance to the unfolding experience of what it means to be a part of humanity? And even as I say that, and tune into the transpersonal energy, it is an invitation to a much larger container than humanity has the capacity to contain. That's why it's transpersonal. It's way bigger than any of us have thought about. But as we engage with one another, the invitation is there. Test the waters. Test the limits. Test your capacity of seeing where else could we go? How inclusive could we be in the dance of life with one another going forward that is not steeped in war and competition and, economic curtailment of what it is that we are doing with our resources here on planet Earth. Are they being used wisely, these resources? Do you sense that the engagement with one another in the system that exists right now is being of a growing and continuing benefit to more and more of us? Essay question. Each of us needs to ponder that and ask ourselves, ask your heart. Is what you are doing, is what we are doing, making this world a better place? A lot of us are doing just that. But is it enough? Oops. As Thursday becomes Friday, keep your eye on our Mercury. Mercury turns direct. And I have to ask you, each Mercury retrograde cycle is an opportunity to dive just a wee bit deeper into the trickster, that dual level personality that has the capability of moving between levels of consciousness, moving between levels of reality. Of all the gods, Mercury could traverse from heaven to hell and back again, the only one who could. So during Mercury retrograde cycles, the invitation is there to delve deeper into the experience of where is it that your thoughts wander? How deep and profound, how dark might they be, or how enlightened might they become, all fluidly flowing with the trickster energy back and forth, forth and back, testing the experience of being alive with everything that you have, you know. Will there be an ease or an invitation from others to participate in this level of conversation? It may show up, but how effective it is will have everything to do with your willingness from a mercurial perspective to be an investigator. Be vibrantly alive and recognize that something is percolating and trying to awaken your conscience in ways that have not transpired yet. As this week comes to Friday and the weekend, Mercury stations right there at 16 degrees of Cancer and says, okay, that's enough backpedaling. Let's take the, what should we call it? Take the perspectives that you have gleaned during this Mercury retrograde cycle and see if it fits in with the Sabian symbol for that degree. The unfoldment of multi-level potentialities issuing from an original germ. The life surge, the keynote, the life's urge to actualize one's birth potential. I trust that this particular Cancerian Mercury retrograde cycle has given each of you the opportunity to tune in specifically to that ancestral level of awareness. And are they asking you, what the hell have you been doing? Or are they, patting you on the back saying, great job, keep it up, because what it is that these ancestors set in motion back along the way has always been an invitation for us to pick up and run with, expand upon. And Mercury coming out of retrograde on Friday this week, cautiously engage with others this upcoming weekend in a fashion that has respect for one another and for the larger potential picture that these transpersonal energies are currently inviting us to engage with. There's a larger perspective that's always been present. It's just a little bit more intense, shall we say, right now. The invitation is a little closer to the surface. So if, as we engage with one another going forward after this Mercury retrograde cycle, something along the lines of that larger transpersonal perspective could be very, very near to your conscience, to our conscience. And if it should show up, be willing. Tease it up a little bit. Enjoy the potential new space that could be invited into the interchange that we have with one another from a much larger perspective. And like the stones on the beach, it takes all of us, no matter what our colors, no matter what our thoughts, to engage with one another and ask powerful questions about the larger meaning of life. That each one of us, bringing with us the brilliance of all our various perspectives, might be ready to birth into this new moment. Sorry about the first part of this thing where I didn't have the microphone down near my mouth. If you crank up your volume, you might be able to hear me. I'm going to try and listen to it and see if I need to just cut it off, because I'm going to cover the information that I began with all through this consideration, and I have brought it up, I'm sure, more than once. So that's all I got for this week. Coming up, I look forward to the Mercury going direct as we engage with one another in whatever format that is going to be waiting with bated breath for some new level of conversation, some new level of awareness that we are individually bringing for each other's consideration going forward. Thanks. That's all.